Today, I'm just going to be talking about business plans. I personally never made a comprehensive business plan for my business, but looking back, I thought they were a complete waste of time, right? Now, I know a lot of people do. A lot of people love them. A lot of people think they're a waste of time. But looking back, if I had have done something and had a bit of a game plan, not in the sense of I needed to do competitor analysis and my like 3-year targets and this and that. I needed a framework of some kind would have really helped me stay on track and most importantly, understand where to spend my time. So I just think I would have saved a lot of money, a lot of energy if I had have had a bit of a guide to pull me back on track. So this business plan, your usual boring plan, at least I hope you don't think it's boring. There's no random crap that just sits in a document and get dusty and never see the light of day again. It's a clear breakdown of the core areas that you always need to focus on in your food truck business, not just when you're starting out, but the areas that constantly going to need attention and growth and tweaking if you want to grow sustainably. Like you put too much energy into one area and the other area falls behind. So it's really good to get a visual and have a plan for how you're going to spend your time, most importantly. So whether you're starting out or have been in the game for years, I think everyone in the mobile catering world should see this. Hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in now. So the food truck business plan. All right. So the 3 core areas of your business are location, operations, and optimization. Basically, without a location, you've got no exposure. And without operations, you've got no sales. So these 2 things kind of work in unison to bring revenue in the door. And once you got revenue, we all know that you can have money coming in the door, but no money in your pocket. So we've got to optimize our business to make sure we make as much profit as possible. A more realistic take on this is instead of saying no location or no operation, or if you have a bad location or bad operations and bad optimization, just say your location is half as good as your friend or your operations are 30% as good as someone you know, but everything else is right. It's dramatically going to affect your business. Now, just pretend these are like knobs that you can play with in your business and tinker with. And anytime you turn one in the right direction, it's going to help you make more money, free up time, and run a better business, which is what we're all here for, right? So I hope that kind of paints the picture of the framework we're looking at here. That's kind of what this whole plan is all about. The next thing I want to talk about is a concept called the revenue river. So I want you to imagine if you're trying to drive to success in your food truck, what are the stops you need to make along the way to get to success? Well, first you're going to find a location. Then you're going to find that once you've got exposure, a location, you need eyes on your truck. Once you get eyes on your truck, you supply that demand. And once you supply the demand, you execute effectively. Once you can execute effectively, well, as I said above, you've got money coming in. You've got to figure out how you're going to keep that money in your pocket. So essentially, your business is always trying to flow down this river, and the fewer snags in the way, the less problems you have with all these things, the faster you're going to get to profit. It's a great location. There's no snag there. You've got great demand. You've got ease of supply, amazing optimization. You figured all these things out. Your business is just going to flow down the river with ease. You're going to make a lot of money and you're really going to enjoy it. So in a nutshell, the better job you can do of all these things, the more money you'll make. So these are the kind of questions you need to start asking. How to secure a location? What kind of location works for me? How am I going to operate my business? How am I going to generate demand, supply it, execute? How am I going to tinker with my expenses, and how's this all going to work? And that's what this plan is all about. The real life stuff that's, at the end of the day, going to make an impact on your bottom line. Nothing more, nothing less. All right. So firstly, in this worksheet, we're going to talk about location. So as I said, the questions you need to ask are, number one, what kind of location's best for me? And two, how to secure a location. So just looking at this already, you're going to be able to see, I know I want to do public events and that's it. Or I just want to park my truck on a permanent location at a petrol station and be done with it. That's what I want to do. And of course, there's all sorts of pros and cons to public, private, and permanent events. We don't have time to go into all of that now, but it's critical that when you're first starting out, you just pick one of these and you'll understand pretty quickly why, because I'm going to go into the process you need to take to acquire these locations. And there's probably a bit more to it than you think. So we're going to go into how to find public events first. We break it down into three steps: find, apply, and validate. And that's the same for all three types of event. So just say we're going to find a public event. Find online network and events. Anyway, we're not going to go into the full breakdown of how to find events, but the important thing is you've got your strategy, and you can go into more detail here about your process you're going to use to find events. Everyone's slightly different depending on the type of public events they want to do, but it's really important that you have your strategy really clear, because it's not a once done job. It's a consistent thing that needs to keep happening. And as your business grows, you're going to need to get people to do it. So when you first start, this is going to be you, 100%. It's really important that you're obviously doing everything in the business when you start. So nextly, once you find events, you've got to apply for them. So you basically want to write down notes of what you've learned, how to apply for events, what your system's going to be, same thing. You want to have your critical elements in place. Things that markets managers and festival organizers really want to see, the critical elements. You want to have a template. And lastly, you want to figure out who's going to do it. Me, might be a partner, or if you're more advanced, it might be a VA. And then validating the event. So you can either go through your network or screening factors. Screening factors is things like, is it a ticketed event, weather, how many people are coming, how many vendors are there, all these things. And there's an equation we can use to figure out, is it worthwhile? You want to talk to your network first. That's always the most reliable source. But if you don't have a network to talk to, then that's the next best thing. All right. So we're just going to do two today. We'll go through private events, and obviously you can download the worksheet and do the same thing for permanent. If that's you. But the whole idea of this worksheet is to keep this and not just have it. So that's your plan. Change it, play with it. You might decide that you find 80% of your events through your network and your friends. So you might just take away This might be a complete waste of time. You're going through online sources and stuff. You know what I mean? You want to do what works for your business. But then applying, you might have like every business is so different. So you're going to slowly figure out what works for you and you're going to keep that. And that's your framework. All right. So with private events, they're so different, but the similarity is the find, apply, and validate still stands. So it's the exact same, except instead of you finding the event, they need to find you. And instead of you applying for the event, they apply through you. And you've just got to have your frameworks in place for this. Obviously, it's very different to public events, but still just as important if you want to acquire private events regularly. So it's basically the same as up here. Online, network, events. That's how people are going to find your business. And it's going to be them. The key is to be able to be found when they go looking. Applying, when they apply, it's going to be a sales conversation and then an offer. And let's say it's you having that conversation. And then when you're validating the event, it's basically a process of making a deal, doing a deposit, and executing. That's a truck, by the way. I hope you get it. This can be a pretty time-consuming process. Obviously, the execution is a big part of it, but in terms of the location acquisition, it's the kind of thing that if you've got a partner that is, available to help with this kind of thing, it's a perfect spot to kind of slot them in and help. And you can see bit by bit, you'll be able to say, for example, hey, I'm busy working at events. But we need more events for this next month. I don't have time to find them, or like our website's not converting. Like we need to be able to be found better. We need to work on that. So you'll get the idea of where to slot yourself in, where to slot a manager in. If you've got a business partner or whatever it is, this gives you a really clear picture of where you need to allocate your resources. All right. So we're not going to go into permanent for this one, but by all means, if you've got a passion for permanent sites, go nuts. We've got other modules on that as well in more detail to cover permanent site acquisition. So next, we're just going to move on to operations. So operations comes down to three things: demand, supply, and execution. So basically there's three elements inside all of these things that we focus on to help get you there visually. I won't go crazy into all of them for now, but we're just going to touch on each of them pretty quickly, and hopefully you'll get a rough idea of how you can comment for your subjective business and build out your plan. So for a concept, got to be unique. Say you're going to do private events. You want to, I don't know, is it popular for weddings? And the menu. So you want your concept to be tailored to the type of events you want to do. That's why we go through location first. Signage comes down to, it's your signage for your like brand, like if you've got a banner or an overhead sign, but it's also your website, Instagram account, and then your offer comes down to price, package, portion. Basically, if your concept and signage has kind of reeled them in, generated that, or almost generated demand, it's your offer's job to sell them. And your offer is basically a game of, hey, what am I getting? And you've got to have a compelling offer to make them give you money at the end of the day. And this goes for not just people at, say, a market or a festival, customers about to buy with you. It's also market organizers, private catering, prospects, and whatnot. They've got to be able to view your offer and decide, yep, we want that at our event because that's gonna bring value. All right. So at the end of the day, generating demand is getting people to buy what you have, which is otherwise known as marketing. All right. So once you have demand, you just need supply. And then you have revenue, which is pretty cool. So luckily, a lot of you watching this are chefs or have hostel experience already, and you won't have much of an issue with this step. All right. So source is all things ingredients. So things like, well, this is for me anyway. Wholesale veg. Dry stock. Cleaning and packaging supplies. Same guys for me. And then if there's any kind of logistical things, like based on if you're doing private catering or public catering, like for me, I get everything delivered to the site. And it's a good example of, as you go, things will change very slightly in all different areas. And the more efficient you can get, the more money you're going to make. Like, for example, if I don't have everything delivered to site, it's going to be a lot more handling, potentially more points of refrigeration. It's just more labor at the end of the day. And labor is your biggest cost. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Team is basically made up of the key people you need in your team. So in my team, I know I always need a driver. Unskilled labor. Sounds pointless to put it in, but if you have unskilled labor as a core part of your team, they're typically not paid as well as a chef or even a driver. I also need at big festivals, handyman. I know what that means, but it's basically someone that if there's a plumbing leak or if it's windy or something like this, and we're under a marquee setup, it's a critical skill set for someone who's a bit handy to makeshift or deal with something in that sense that's probably not going to be the same person as my people person that's usually the manager or supervisor. Now, this is a very idealistic picture, but you'll see in one of our modules the team builder, if you've seen that one. We go into it in a lot more detail, the kinds of people you need in your team, but it's very important that when you're starting out, you include who you need in your team there, and as it grows, you change it bit by bit. The idea is the ingredients come to your site, your team produce the ingredients, into your product, and it's all executed under a layout that makes sense. But basically, it's confirm where your people go in floor plan. And once you can do that, you've got a revenue stream. So we're going to move on to execution next. So execution in a nutshell. It's all well and good to generate demand and supply that demand. You've got revenue coming in. But if that whole operation isn't executed well, you're 100% going to be leaving a lot of money on the table. So it comes down to three things: flow, speed, and compliance. Basically, if the system's not flowing, like, it's not sustainable, people aren't going to be happy in the team, whether that's for short term or long term, and it's just going to be messy, unprofessional, and it's not sustainable at the end of the day. If you're not fast enough, you're not going to turn over as much volume per hour as you could, and you're literally not receiving as much money as you could be if you're faster. And if you're not compliant, it's basically going to cause you a world of problems, depending how what type of event you're at. If you're at a major public event and you're not compliant, well, you could get shut down. You could get all sorts of things. You could have someone come in and say, stop trade while we figure this stuff out. So operationally, in terms of execution, this is basically how you need to do it. So for flow, we're going to tweak for efficiency. You're going to look at your layout that you've done. You're going to tweak it for efficiency and just drop little to-do notes just in here of how your system can flow better. Over years, I was always just analyzing little spots in my operation. I'd go, if I put a heat lamp in this spot, then that food will be able to sit there a little bit longer and stay warm, and they won't have to make that, or I can have a bain-marie on this side as opposed to there, and then that person doesn't have to pass that to them, or they don't have to walk around. Or if I put this barbecue here and this deep fry here next to each other, that's actually a one-person job, and then I can cut a wage that's saving me $150 a day or something. So little things like that of how you can make everything flow a bit better. It's really important to note down things you think of in a plan like this, or otherwise it'll likely just never happen, or you'll forget little things and you'll just grow slower. Speed, as I said, it's all about what's your capacity per hour. And you really want to write down and have a clear idea of what your capacity per hour is in your operation. Some larger event organizers will actually ask you, what's your capacity per hour? And if it's not 200 or 300 units minimum, then that's an issue. So I would always say 200 units per hour can be a goal. And if your system's not flowing and you're only producing 100 units per hour, well, you're only turning over half as much money. And you might say, well, how is that possible? Well, second point of sale, more equipment, more people, higher volume, you do the maths. So speed's really important to be fast, but it's also important to be slow. So if you're at a public event, read the queue. If you're at a private event, read the room. It's all about taking your time in slow periods you really want to have a game plan around your speed, flow, and lastly, your compliance. Let's write the dates down in here when you've got to get it re-looked at. Electrical tags, food certificates, when's it all happening, how is it being taken care of. If you don't have a schedule for that, you're going to lose track and you're going to become uncompliant. It's going to cost you money. Moving on now to optimization. So, as I said, we now have revenue, but what you find pretty crazy is there's a lot of caterers out there that don't. Not only are they not trimming back their costs and trying to increase their revenue, they actually don't know how much money they make. Like they think it's pretty good. Like if they turn over 10 grand somewhere, they'll be like, oh, I made 10 grand. And I'll say, well, no, you didn't. Like I saw someone working at your event. You didn't make 10 grand. Like, what about your GST? What about your food? And they'll say, oh yeah, like less the expenses and stuff. And I'll say, well, how much was that? And they genuinely don't know. They haven't figured it out. So this is a number of people, by the way. It's not just a few randoms, but it's really important that you track this from every event. So the goal of optimization is to look at money in, money out. And obviously, we want this to increase and this to decrease. At the end of the day, we want more money to stay right here in your pocket. All right, so that's the goal of optimization. That's what we're doing. There's a 3-step process to optimizing, or even taking the first step to getting good at optimizing. Number 1 is to identify. This is things like portion control, wages, shifts, creeping, as I like to call it, invoices from like suppliers and things. And once you've identified all these things, and you can note down any of your things that you identify just here. Second step is to track and measure this stuff. And the best example of this, of how it can kind of get away from you, is just say you're making a burger and you're charging $15 for it, and you calculate your food cost, all your ingredients is $3 for the burger to be made. So it's at 20% food cost. And you say, okay, great, that includes everything. And then at the end of an event, you might work out, or it might be months later, you might look at a stack of events and you've turned over 100 grand and you've got 30 grand worth of food invoices. And you might go, well, that's not fair because it should be 20 grand, 20%. Why is it 30 grand? And this is why you need to track stuff, because there's so many things that can happen. There can be staff wasting stuff. There can be free food being given away. Someone might be stealing. Portion control. If you're not controlling how much food is going into each thing, for example, if you've got handmade burger patties and you're not tracking how big those patties are each time, then, well, you might be putting in twice as much meat to every burger, and it might have cost you 10 grand. I'm not exaggerating. You might finish an event, you might have thrown some stock away and not realized how much that stock was worth. You might have been better putting it into cold storage for a month or something until the next time you run that event. So it's really important to keep on top of all these things, but not just know about them, track them. So for portion control, use specific spoons and scoops, scales, anything that can track and measure. For wages and shifts, a lot of beautiful, lovely employers will just ask their staff at the end of an event, how many hours do you do? And they might say, 20. I'm not saying don't trust your staff, but you might have expectations in your head that they take an unpaid break for half an hour, and they might not have included that. Little things like that really add up. So tracking all these things, writing it down into a spreadsheet, I would recommend. Handwrite it, do whatever you want, but track it and stay on top of it as you go. Don't sit down at the end of a month and then go, oh, I wonder what that was. It's impossible. All right, so lastly is to tweak these things. Basically make the initial changes, and then just keep reeling it in. Most importantly, once you really get on top of it, delegate all this stuff to one of your managers. Make it their job. Ensure portion control. Measure shift times. They should know what your wages margin are for the end of the day. They should understand that you're running a business. If you're paying them well as a manager, you reserve a right to get them to do jobs like this. All right? So let's say this is your money in, money out. You want to fill out all your money that's coming in, which is going to be things like private gigs, all your income streams, public events, market, festival, whatever. By the way, it might just be one thing, might just be private events you're doing. And out, you want to put your veg, staff, super, GST, suppliers. You basically get the idea, but once you have all this, you can track it. Make a list of what you need to track. How are you going to track it? And then you can go through and tweak these things. You might say, I've never actually even looked at my supplier invoices from my bakery or something. They might have just been creeping up. They've probably got a note on there, we're increasing our prices, and all you need to do is negotiate with them and actually push back a little bit. It's okay to do that. You're in business to make money, and so are they, and it's nothing personal between either of you. All right, so obviously subtracting the money out from the money in is going to give you your profit, but the key is to stay on top of this and consistently track using systems. Don't just do it once, and because that's, as you grow, it'll get harder and harder, and it's even more important because a tiny slither of a bigger business is so much more. So that basically goes for this entire plan. As you grow, it's really important to tweak little things in this plan and make sure they're consistent with what you're doing. It's, you start doing permanent events, look at, all right, well, now I actually have to find public events. I need to do my private event outreach and sales conversations and offers, and I need to do the deal with them, and I need to validate my public events. I need to work out if they're worth doing. You might say, well, I might be better off just sticking with private events, because the validating needs to be done by me, and I'm just going to be too busy then. And I'm going to probably make similar money out of doing more work anyway. And that's kind of the whole idea of this business plan, is to show you where your time needs to go and how that time is going to affect your bottom line. That's a lot to think about. I hope that was all helpful. But quickly, just to recap, we've got locations: public, private, permanent; operations, demand, supply, execution; and optimization, money in, money out, profit at the end. Play with all the levers and knobs and track it all, measure it, keep it all in order, and you'll have a super successful business. So I hope that was helpful. Good luck planning your business. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.